I have to admit, the first lot I killed. Went a long way to buy them. And I think I suffocated them in a cold frame in the winter because they look so delicate. You think, they've got to be protected from everything. So that was my sad start to auricula growing. But I've been growing them now for at least 30 years, probably a bit longer.
One of my favourite posts from you the other day was how you'd been auditioning your auriculas to go in the theatre. How long were you auditioning your auriculas for, Jane Ann?
It took me 10 hours. I've got 700 plants.
Hello and welcome to episode 46 of Talking Dirty, over at East Ruston Old Vicarage in so many shades of blue this cold day. In fact, he had so many layers on and he's just whipped them off for the podcast so he doesn't look like he's in the North Pole, but I think he feels like he is. It is Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
We're in greyness. Over in sunny Cambridgeshire is Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson. She's got a wonderful smile on, and today she is in apricot or apricot.
A little touch of floral as well. Do you know, I think our guest on this podcast must be in sunshine because he's come wearing a t-shirt while we're all bundled up in our layers. It is Luke Whiting of Alpine specialists DArcy and Everest. And if you are lucky enough to be watching the video version of this, you'll be able to tell instantly that he's an Alpine specialist because of the amazing array of plants in front of him that we're going to talk about. Oh, what a display. Before we get onto that, Luke, what is your middle name?
Well, I've got two, Patrick and Robert.
Oh,
so Luke, Patrick, Robert Whiting. There you go. At school, you know, when you're in primary school and they say, well, like, so you can go out to break time once you've written your name and spelled it correctly. Yeah, like, my parents hated me.
Well, don't worry.
Like yours as well. How many names have you got?
Well, yeah, all the names and all the letters as well. Who knows how many S's there are in my name?
Yeah,
I barely
never got
know.
to break time until you was about 8 years old. So.
Now, Luke, for people who don't know about DArcy and Everest, and if they're regular listeners to this podcast, they will know because we're a little bit Alpine obsessed at the moment because of Alan's troughs that he's been sort of refurbing at East Ruston Old Vicarage.
I have to say, lots of the plants that I'm using in my refurb have come from DArcy and Everest, and very good they are too. I would just like to say before we start, you know, that when you start using plants, I mean, you start using Alpine plants, you probably go to your local garden centre and you'll go to the section which has Alpine plants in it. And then you'll gradually get to the stage where you think, well, gosh, these are nice, but they're not exactly groundbreaking, or, you know, they don't open your eyes. But you go to
the same since the 1970s as well, pretty much. It's the same selection since the 1970s.
Yeah. You go to DArcy and Everest, and I mean, there's two things. One I can see that Luke's got in the picture is Rhodohypopsis, which they have a huge selection of. And the other thing is, of course, those lovely little things called house leeks, which everybody loves. But, you know, there are so many different ones. And when you see the selection offered by people like DArcy and Everest, you open your eyes. So say no more.
So, yeah, we've been raving about Alpines and about you guys for a bit now. So it's such a treat to have you join us with some of your plants. But what is your history? What's the story of DArcy and Everest?
So it's family business. So DArcy and Everest originally started in 1992. Because the family had a wholesale business selling alpines and herbs, and they wanted to exhibit a Chelsea flower show. And the rules at the time, if you was a wholesaler, it was a big no-no. You couldn't get in the floor marquee or the grand pavilion. And they wanted to do a whole rock garden in there. So they started up DArcy and Everest as kind of like a sister company. So then they could bypass the rules of Chelsea and create a rock garden. So they done the rock garden in 93. And yeah, that's how it all started. And then it sort of progressed. And then it was my mum's sort of hobby nursery. I'd say it's a hobby nursery. And then I came into it when I was 20, so like 20 years ago. And then I stopped, went backpacking with my wife and that sort of stuff. And then came back, kind of like hoodwinked me into it about 10, 11 years ago now. But like back then, obviously, like initially I was like, oh, I want to go everywhere. I want to like see everything. I don't want to be stuck in a nursery. And then like sort of coming back sort of age 30, I was like, I just want that chilled out life now. I just want to like, and yeah, the nursery life gives you that chilled like sort of life, and the plants like sort of you get to know them, you get to know what they like, and yeah, it's just like bunch of friends. You like sort of have their quirks and have their downsides, and yeah, you get to know them.
I have to say, Luke, for many years, there's a plant sitting in front of your T-shirt. I just can't take my eyes off it. It's a plant for many years. Yeah, no, right at the front. For many years.
The Calceolaria.
Yeah, I've just written Calceolaria. I was going to be one of my Flomos was going to be the Calceolaria. Well, I got that actually because it came from you, but I mean, I'd like more of it. But just tell us about that, because that is, if you could hold it up, that would be rather nice, so that people can actually get a closer look at it, because it really is. Oh, look at that! I mean, that is an unbelievable. Tell us about it, please.
So it's Calceolaria fothergillii. So sort of Falkland Islands. It likes growing in with this just sort of grass, fully exposed, really hardy.
The Falkland Islands, I think we can safely say it's hardy and windproof.
Yes, yeah. Windproof is like one thing that a lot of people ask. Like, sort of, they're fully exposed and they're sort of asking, will it survive sort of the windy conditions they've got and the cold? Yes. The thing with it as well.
Most Alpines will survive the wind because the very nature of where they grow at height and they grow in open situations. So that's the people are really answering their own questions.
Well, like the first question they always ask is it hardy? Which is yeah, you got to take it serious as well. Obviously, like when I started on the nursery, I had no idea. 20 years ago, I knew a bit because obviously I grew up with a family of growing wholesale, and like my like paperboy job was going in the hot greenhouses and weeding and stuff like that, and coming out and trying not to faint. And so I kind of knew a basis, but yeah, like sort of you get to know more as you work with it. But yeah, we grow it from seed, and initially, like when you look at reports on growing the Calceolaria, it says it needs a cold germination. Doesn't germinate in the middle of summer. It will be 100% germination. You try and germinate it in spring after a cold winter, you get about sort of 30, maybe 30% at most. Yeah, you do it in the middle of summer, 100% germination. So what becomes like obviously I've told everyone how to grow it, but like this is the thing, obviously working with all the plants, you're constantly sort of testing and trialing and trying to make it easy for yourself as a nurseryman to get these plants to the customer and things like that. Yeah,
fresh seed germinates best, in other words, Luke.
Yeah, with that it does. Yeah, with some obviously it doesn't. Everyone has like sort of tales of like sort of Juno irises or whatever they are. So
this is quite something because we've got in our wildflower meadow here, we've got a fantastic show of Camassias at the moment. Camassias are bulbs in North America, where they're eaten by the indigenous people, I think, much as we eat potatoes, because it's a starchy old bulb.
Right, yeah.
If I'd believed the books, including the venerable RHS Encyclopedia, I would never have grown them, because they tell us in that book that they like a moist soil. Well, our water table is 19 feet below the surface. The soil here is a fairly light sandy loam overall. It is not moist. And yet 20 years ago, 25 bulbs of Camassia is now sheets and sheets of them. So it just
doing the right thing.
AKA your little Calceolaria. It just goes to prove, don't believe what you read.
Yeah, we get told off by customers for what the RHS put on their website, and so they're like, you've told me this plant's drought tolerant, and it says clearly it needs to like be in moist conditions. And we have a little runkus, and I got a really good telling off, and I was like, look, I'll take a picture. This is it in it. The ground is cracked, and look, it looks amazing. Where the clay is cracked, and it's still looking amazing. I was like, you can't get drier than that. That's pretty much as dry as it goes. So, yeah.
What I love about Calceolarias is their little faces. We were taking a stroll around Alan's garden with Bridget Girling of Moss and Stone, who's featured on this podcast a few times, and poring over all the plants, having a wonderful time. And she made the fantastic observation that it looked like a character from Sesame Street. It does look like a little Muppet.
Yeah, it's like a little face, isn't it? Yeah, very like you could have a little puppet show. We'll do that later on. I'll take him off and we'll do a little Punch and Judy session with him.
Now, surrounded by all these plants and having grown up with them, are there ones that speak to you more than others, or do you love them all in their own individual ways?
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of like a bunch of friends. So like I was saying earlier, you've got the sort of the positives and the sort of negatives of like sort of different ones, pushing you to sort of try and not be able to produce them. And then there's the other ones that are just straightforward and easy, but like sort of everyone has its different quirks, and like sort of obviously the colour as well through the year. When I first, about 10 years ago, you asked me then, and it would have been, I love this plant, or I love this plant, this is my favourite plant in the world. But yeah, like now, like sort of, yeah, it is like sort of a broad spectrum of all the plants that we grow.
And when you were small, you say that, you know, you had your kind of Saturday job weeding in the hot greenhouses, but did you, I don't know, sort of rail a little bit against it? Or were you open to the idea of, oh, I love this plant, like from childhood? Were you kind of a gardening child by choice, or was it only to earn that pocket money?
So like I did start a gardening club at primary school. But I think that was just to impress girls. I'm not sure. It didn't really work. There was only boys in the gardening club. We'd probably all tried the same thing. So yeah, so like sort of I had no real sort of interest in it. I was just a boy. Like I just like boy stuff. I like the rock garden because you could climb all over the rocks, and I like the sort of arboretum section in the garden because I could climb trees. But yeah, like so actually getting into the plants when I was a kid. That was sort of nothing really, other than not treading on the ones that obviously like you knew like if you damaged that plant you was in serious trouble. So
I bet. Well, let's have a bit of this show and tell then, because Alan's already jumped the gun. I love how Alan tells people like Ben Preston they need to learn patience.
Right. That's the thing with a Zoom call as well. You never know like who's going to speak, and so like sort of patience on a Zoom call is definitely needed, I reckon.
There you go, Alan. You can try and increase your patience because we've got to work our way through them all systematically. So we've had a little bit of Calceolaria fun. Where are we going next, Luke?
So let's go for sort of more sort of dry conditions, and so this is Delosperma Beaufort West. So lovely baby pink Delosperma. And so you can still see it's got a bit of orange in the foliage where it's still sort of through the winter season because it's just not warm enough, is it? And so, yeah, so then in spring, it'll be a normal spring, so probably our summer now, it'll be green foliage with those baby pink flowers. And it just like cascades. So if you've got troughs, it just softens the corner. And so with like sort of quite a lot of Delospermas, they're quite sort of angular foliage, whereas this one's soft as well, so even the foliage is soft. So just it's perfect for sort of softening those sort of edges on containers, or like sort of in your rock garden, just softening the rocks that you've got in there. Yeah, and that that's one of my favorite at the moment. But like I say, it's a seasonal thing. My favorites are I'm very fickle. They change pretty quickly.
That idea of cascading as well. I know, Alan, you've touched on that when we've talked about your Alpine troughs. You are very good at picking a plant and positioning it, say that little Clematis Pixie that then will just trail over the edge, or the Foxtail Rosemary, and it just totally transforms the trough. It gives it so much extra character and kind of contour.
I think that's an important point. And I mean, I would echo what Luke has just said. I mean, he's a great expert on these plants, but Delospermas are absolutely wonderful. For the edge of a trough, they will trail over and you get this waterfall of colour. And they're not just in that wonderful soft pink that he showed us before, because they come in all colours, Luke, am I right?
Yeah, we have some, we do breeding with them as well. So we've got some new colours this year. Each one brings something different to it. And so you got the vibrancy, and as well, some of them spread enormously well, like the nubigenum, which is going to spread by about 6 foot. If you put it in a raised bed, it'll cascade down and then creep along the floor as well. And amazing, just in a bright yellow carpet. So yes.
So if somebody's got a barren courtyard where in full sun, I mean, if they could plant that in them, and they'd just get a carpet of colour, it'd be fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just perfectly ideal for everything that you need when you have that sort of gravel or dry area, or you want to soften edges. Yeah, it's very, very good for that.
You or I wouldn't be satisfied with just one plant, would we? We'd have to put others in with it.
yeah, exactly. Well, like so, and as well, like I'm very much now for planting bulbs. So like sort of rain lilies like Habranthus, they're really good. So when the sort of rains of September come, they pop through with oranges and pinks, and even we've got a blue in production at the moment.
Am I right in thinking that they look like a bit like crocus?
Yeah, so they're more of a sort of a cone, but yeah, and some of them open up wider like a crocus, but most of them remain sort of in the cone.
Right.
Yeah, they're like sort of stunning. So like I tend to, like when I'm sort of doing planting suggestions for people's rock gardens and that, I always add a few of those in, so they're just sporadically through the garden. So then in September they just start firing up and start flowering. So yeah,
brilliant.
A lovely little September surprise.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. When it starts cooling down and you need something to perk you up in the rock garden, yeah, they just like start firing out, and yeah, they're great. So,
what have you got next, Luke?
I thought I'd bring some of the rhodohypoxes, because we just sort of acquired these from Tail Valley, which is another nursery, and they specialised a lot in woodland, and sort of on the other side they've done the rhodohypoxes collections. And so we've just sort of gathered about, they delivered them in March. So we agreed with them last year. And a lovely Chris and Lorraine, a lovely couple, and they've just retired from the show circuit, obviously because of like COVID, it retired them a bit early, but I mean, they're pretty happy with their dogs and sort of the wildlife around them. And so, yeah, there's 128 different varieties we have now. From just having sort of 5 Rhodoxis varieties, we've now got 128. So we're kind of sorting through them and sort of finding which ones work for us. And so over the next few, at the moment, we just sell them as a random collection. So for customers, we just pick them out randomly out of sales. And the stock ones, we're sort of maintaining them. And once we've finished the new gardens, we're going to test them out and see which ones are sort of more hardy, and so the different varieties. So yeah, so they're really exciting at the moment. So because they're all new to me, and there's so many of them. Very happy with those at the moment. But yeah, there's let me give you some. See if I can get this. So yeah, just 2 there, and then you've got the double as well. So this is. You can't really see it in the camera, but
yeah. Oh.
Yeah, anyway, so yeah, there's
flowers.
I know there's so many of them, and like
so run us through what their names were, just to test you. See,
so the double we've got kiwi, and then like you're going to test me out here, and you've got Mars, which is the nice deep pink, and then this one here is EA Bold, which is a sort of pale pink. The light doesn't do it justice in here, and then you've got the dark one here. So this is Jupiter. So let me just see if I can. There we go. But yeah, again, it's a nice magenta. Really great, stunning plants at the moment. And so obviously they're full of colour. They've just like sort of now realised that it is starting to warm up. And so, yeah, they're just full of colour at the moment. So where we add the sort of them just as bare soil, where they're dried down through winter, now the whole crop is just in flower. And so it's amazing. Yeah, so it's very nice and exciting at the moment.
That must be a sunny area of plants in the nursery when they all sort of start singing.
Yes, yeah, which is good. Because like sending plants in mail order now, which is like sort of most of our business, is trying to send the flower without damaging the flower is extremely hard. Like at the moment, we're working with a company to produce a box that there's nothing else other than cardboard in it. And so when you open the box, the plants are secured in there. So when they obviously play volleyball with the box in Korea, they still come out intact. And so when you open the top of the box, the plants are just wedged in the bottom, facing up at you with the flowers. Because going to Harrogate Flower Show last week, we literally just blitzed the nursery of flower and just took all the flower because they're so hard to send out. And customers are like bees. Obviously, if they see a flower, they're like straight into it. So yeah, so like the nursery looks quite green. So in some ways the stock bed looks amazing, and like the rhodohypoxes, we've got so many of them. Obviously, they look amazing. But yeah, everything else is green. Where like Harrogate was so busy, we just I came back Friday night, like halfway through the show, and loaded up the van fully again and took it for Saturday and Sunday. just everyone was so happy to like see plants, I think. So.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, people have been starved of so much, being able to buy plants. And also at the moment, as you've pointed out multiple times, Alan, getting hold of stuff at the moment feels so hard. So as soon as you see something in front of you, buy it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I think, and as well, like for like going to that show, talking to exhibitors, because like we just can't get off the nursery of the mail order, but like sort of I think we've got 5 shows this year, but a lot of them they're doing all the plant fairs, and like Alan was saying, he's got a plant fair coming up, and apparently they're just heaving, like sort of you just like sort of go in there, and like sort of everyone just wants to go and see plants, because obviously people, it's great obviously like seeing the plants here and seeing them online. You can see the pictures of them, but nothing takes it to sort of actually seeing them in person and being there and touching them and sort of seeing the size and the actual true colour of them.
And how right you are, Luke, too, about flowers, because the moment somebody sees a flower, they are exactly like bees. Zoom! I want it, it's mine. And they're walking off carrying a 10-litre pot full of roses, but the roses are in flower. Fabulous. Yeah.
It always reminds me of like scenes of Chelsea at the end as well, like people just carrying out massive pots of delphinium, and you're like, they're not going to get that into any vehicle, like, so let alone the tube. You like love asking them sometimes, and you going home on the train? Yeah. I was like, oh, okay then, good luck with that one.
I always love the surprise on a nursery person's face when you ask to buy a plant that doesn't look like much. I remember I was really after one of those big yellow scabious, the cephalaria. And so I was kind of, every plant stand I went to at this nursery, I was on the lookout. So I spotted it and it wasn't in flower yet. So I was like, oh, can I have that? And they're like, hang on a minute, but it's just leaves. Why do you want it? I was on a mission to get that plant, but you're right. It's 90% of the time and you end up being wooed by a pretty flower.
You go in thinking you need one thing, then you like, and I'm the same. Like I have to admit, like I go round and like sort of I like visiting like sort of other nurseries and like gardens and like sort of open like gardens and that. And you just like sort of like because you're seeing its full potential. You're not seeing like sort of foliage, and you like obviously like sort of the more you're in horticulture, the more you recognise things, and obviously. Your brain has a sort of a forward image of it being in flower, even though you're seeing it in foliage. But still, like even a nurseryman, like you just like ooh, and drawn to it straight away, seeing its full potential.
To put you on the spot, Luke, can you remember? And obviously, opportunities might have been limited over the last 12 months, but can you remember a time in recent months when that's happened? What was the most recent thing that sidetracked you, that detoured you off, and you ended up buying something you hadn't meant to?
So not buying, but I remember I was at RHS Wisley, and like sort of the Alpine team they'd come in behind the scenes, and like we have one of their students coming tomorrow just to like sort of have a bit of nursery experience. And I was walking through the greenhouse, and that's where I got the blue Habranthus. Now I believe it's the blue Habranthus because they weren't going to give me any seed, but I was like, look, that seed's falling in that cobweb just in the window there. And like I hadn't got in there looking for Habranthus. They got in there looking in one of their greenhouses, and I was just like. Like stared at it as like that. I definitely need one of those. And then there's like no, not having any seed. I was like, can I just have one bulb? Just one bulb. I can do something with one bulb. And they're like, no. And then I looked around, and there's a cobweb just like below the bench, and obviously caught some seed in it. I was like, well, like I could tidy up that cobweb for you. So, yeah.
You know what, Luke? I think that's the best excuse I've heard in years.
Yeah, I was doing them a favour. I was tidying their glass house.
Sorry, I'm sticking to it.
So some things like sort of acquired, like sort of just off chance or whatever. And that's the nice thing, is this like coming across something randomly, like not expecting to sort of go and see something, just like getting drawn into something that you don't expect to be there.
I also love that now when it grows on it flowers, what a story it has attached to it and what provenance.
It'll probably be bright orange. It'll probably be the wrong seed. I'll be like, I have to go back and like sweet talk of like when it's just going to go to seed, and then flick that one into the cobweb. That was about 3 years ago now. So yeah, so it'll be flowering this year. So I'll definitely tell September this year what colour it is.
And right there, you capture something that comes up time and again on this podcast, which is the patience you have to have when you're growing these things. I mean, we did this wonderful trip to Richard Hobbs' garden, and he is big into growing bulbs from seed. And Alan has caught that bug and has been trying to share that on the Get Gardening YouTube channel with his Sprengeri, Tulipa Sprengeri video, which I'll link to again so people can go and watch it. But it is a big, long process for some of these plants for you to grow them from the very beginning.
Yeah, and customers want a flowering plant. So like, the alliums in Brickham is like sort of a really dainty allium, sort of end of thumb sized pendula bell flowers, really, really showy. Takes 5 years from seed to get to flowering size. And all the bulbs we get as offsets, we keep those. We have to have a 5-year crop every year available to sell them. And so yeah, so some year like this, last year we sold a few in spring, and then this year we haven't got any until September, because we need a seed crop, because part of it hybridized. So so then we had to split all that crop to make sure that they were all true, and then start again from that. So yeah, some plants aren't easy, but yeah, that's obviously what makes it interesting. So, and you just got to be patient with them.
Yeah, and it's also the space and the organisation, because you've got to make sure you keep track of them. All of that time and care that goes into them over those years.
Yeah, so bulbs are easy in the sense that you can fit a lot in sort of a 3-litre pot. And so like sort of you can split them down sort of later on when they get into size, and then put them in their individual pots, and then sort of grow them on ready for point of sale. But yeah, the sort of some other plants that take longer, obviously you need more sort of space to grow them, and you need to grow maybe 25 of them to get a decent crop each year in 10-litre pots or whatever they are. And so then they take up a massive room, whereas like the actual bulbs that we grow, they take up about a probably 3 foot by 10 foot piece of bench, and that's it, like sort of in the whole nursery. They're amazing, like for compactness. Like I don't want to like obviously make it sound easy, because they're not easy, but yeah, the fact that they take up so little space on the nursery is just amazing for us, because space is always an issue.
Well, you just mentioning that I grow Tulipa Sprengeri from seed. I've actually planted a pot when I'm growing them from seed, and I was sorting through the bulbs late last year from a seed tray, and the bulbs, because they're species tulips, the bulbs are really quite small, but the smallest of all I just bunged into a pot and sort of stuck on one side and left them there. And I was going through these pots, cleaning them up a few days ago, and I thought, what's this in here? And there was some muscari in there, but there was also Tulipa Sprengeri. And I picked this pot up, and there's 6 to 8 flower buds in this pot. And so yesterday I was very self-indulgent. I thought, don't split it now, but just put it in the garden as is. And you're right, what you're just saying, Luke, one is no good. You really do need a clump or a group to make a telling display, which is why your alliums, probably the little hanging pink allium that you're talking about, is probably even more precious, because a lot of people, when they're really enthusiastic, they're not going to just buy one, they're going to buy 5.
Exactly, yeah. Yes, yeah. And so we recommend obviously with the allium, obviously it takes a long time to sort of get up to a large clump, like our mature clumps that we have. Yeah. And so like you are obviously, for them, you obviously, the people generally just buy one anyway, because they just want to see it, and it's flowering size, so they're going to see the potential of it straight away. But for us, yeah, it's like we have clumps of about 20 years old, and so obviously they make amazing displays when we take them to shows. Yeah. But you're always worried that they're going to like have a little walk. Yeah, like it's 20 years of growing. Like you're always worried, like whether it doesn't matter whether it's Chelsea or like a smaller show, you're always worried that they might go for a little walk.
As well as growing all these fantastic plants, you actually sell miniature gardens, don't you, on the nursery, I think?
Yeah, one's getting shipped out today, the Alpine bowls. So yeah, they're really like popular for anyone that has a small garden or a large garden, because large gardens, they obviously make features, and in the small garden, it is the garden. Like it like, so we deliver and obviously pre-COVID times we used to go and plant out for customers if they wanted to, and customers like myself are pretty lazy, and so most of them want it planted up. So so yeah, we just go all over the country.
Well, I think it's not just the laziness feature. I think they probably come to you because they know that you're specialists in what you do.
I tease them.
And your knowledge is much greater than theirs, and then probably you'd put plants together that they wouldn't even think about or even know. So, you know, it's a specialist service. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, so with the bowls, we do them in two sizes. So you got the 80 centimetre and the 1 metre. And so they're different sizes for obviously different areas. And the good thing is each one is unique to the customer. So what we do is we create sort of almost like a mini rock garden in there. Some of them want a lush planting, which is absolutely fine, but most of them are going for that sort of classic rock garden. And so you bring in the rock garden to the front, to where you're obviously socialising and drinking your G&Ts or just your tea, and then sort of all those delights and all those sort of seasonal colours are right there. So rather than sort of tucking it at the back of the garden, you sort of bringing it there. And it's also like people with new houses now. The gardens are so small, like sort of literally like sort of, and they're so weird shapes as well. They're like triangle, like wedges, and like sort of off to the side. So they're perfect because you can have your lawn. So like sort of whether you've got dogs or kids or cats that need sort of a bit of garden to sort of run around in, you've got that. And as well, you've got sort of a whole rock garden contained within the sort of patio socialising area. So yeah, so they're very popular. Like I say, one was shipping out today. So I was on the nursery packing that this morning. Then I was like, oh, this will be a great shot for this interview. And then realised I had no battery in the laptop, so I had to come back. Yeah. At least I got that done. So yeah, when they come and pick it up, it's done or whatever.
Those pots, though, I mean, you obviously mentioned the size. That points to how much time and effort goes into them. But there's a lot of, as you would expect from a miniature kind of rockery, a lot of hard landscaping that goes into that. It's not just sort of here's a bit of scree and here are some plants. It's a whole contoured thing.
Yeah, so like when we sort of put it together, we ask the customer if they have any preference of their plants that they obviously want to go in, and the rock types and the sort of the surface scree as well. And then we sort of manipulate what we put into it for where they are. So if they're sort of on a Welsh mountain and it's constantly raining and miserable, then obviously that's a different substrate mix to if they're sort of here in Cambridgeshire, where it's dry in the summers. And so and the planting as well obviously varies for that, but the structure of it, the actual rocks, we arrange in different ways as people may see, like obviously from the website, but mainly it shows when we exhibited them. And that's sort of winter interest. So obviously you're creating that sort of rock garden, and part of the rock garden of a winter is foliage and the rocks themselves sort of creating structure in the garden. And so yeah, it's quite every time when we used to go and plant them up for customers pre-COVID time, and like you go to the garden, is always nice nosing around people's gardens, very nice. Like so some tiny little courtyards, some massive like expansive estates, and then like obviously sort of working like sort of which way the rocks will face in the sort of area that they're planting in. And so yeah, that's kind of what they get for when we plant it out.
Do you use Twofer rock?
No, so we tried wangling some from Wisley once, but yeah, it's quite hard to get hold of.
I could say it's very hard to get hold of because I've not seen it for sale for a long, long time, but I did manage to buy some probably 30 odd years ago, and I kept it in crates behind my. We have this is funny. We have a shed. And we tacked on another shed behind this shed. So it's in the shed behind the shed. You see what I mean?
Yeah. And I put another shed on it.
Yeah. And I've actually been fortunate enough to use it when I've been refurbishing my troughs. I haven't got very much left. I've got a little bit left, but not very much. But I mean, the one great thing about Twofer is it's a very soft limestone rock. You can actually drill into it and you can carve into it. You can become an amateur sculptor and you can dig yourself little planting holes. Which I did with Lewisia tweedii.
Yes, yeah, okay, yeah. So they're very blousy, aren't they? They're very large flowers for.
Yeah, but the one thing they hate is having wet wet crowns, so they're really got to be planted elevated, if you like. That's what I'm trying to say. So I've planted them so that their rosettes are actually almost on the vertical. Not quite, but they're almost on the vertical, and the roots go down through the twofer, and that seems to suit them very well.
So with most of us mere mortals not being able to get hold of twofer, because I've also been on the lookout, because I'm sure we'll come round to this if we have time. I've got this tiny little trough that I want to plant up, and I'm looking for some advice, but I've sort of given up on twofer a little bit. What is it that you find is the best resource that we can actually lay our hands on, Luke?
In Cambridgeshire, you've got Sandy Rock, which comes from a place in Sandy where they quarry it, and it's an orange sandstone, and it's like sort of deep, sort of like a rusty colour, and that works really well. So I drilled holes into that once and grew out of that, and that worked really well. Sort of buried in, so the rock was sort of half buried in a sand bed, so it was moist, and that worked really well. But actually, one time as well, we created a sort of a rock pile with really sort of gritty sandy soil in there, and created sort of, it is in a tiny terracotta pot, and created a sort of minute rock garden in sort of dwarf sort of bonsai style, and that worked really well, like sort of with the porous rocks, like sort of there's a couple of holes drilled in, and like sort of it kind of got close to twofer, but nowhere near in other senses. So that was a nice little sort of project. But like sort of nothing really beats twofer. So, and obviously people like it as well more because it's hard to get. So things that are hard to get sort of draw you in even more, and you want them more. So
Well, you can feel very grateful, Alan, that you've got all that lovely twofer in your rock gardens, because it does look spectacular.
Yeah, I do. And when I don't waste any of it either, because when the pieces become small, shall we say, I kind of build them together. I don't cement them or anything, but I just use you fit them a bit like a dry stone wall, I suppose. So you know, and the cracks and crevices in between, then you plant, and then the plant roots actually hold the whole thing together.
Do you know, I think with any plant, it's wonderful when you see it mature and do its own thing. But there's something so exciting about, you know, you mentioned your alliums when they're a 20-year clump. Seeing these alpines spread and develop and root and intermingle is just magic.
Yeah, most of them, like sort of the crops are young, so they're under a year. So like to get that is very easy. So I always sort of, when I'm talking to customers, I relate it to sort of the baked beans on toast or the Michelin star restaurant. Like there's everything in between, and like I love a roast dinner. Roast dinner is one of my favorite things in the world. And in the plant, sort of in the alpine plants, the roast dinner of plants is perfect, and everyone can achieve that. And like, so you don't have to go into the sort of weird and obscure. You just like to be happy, baked beans on toast or sort of roast dinner.
What's your roast dinner then? What's your roast dinner of alpines?
Roast dinner of alpines, the Louisias are obviously always good. They flower really well. And the Calceolarias, like so the different Calceolarias we do and the Louisias, they're just great colour. But like sort of across the board, like sort of most of the plants we grow are very easy, and even the ones that take 5 years to get to fruition, they're generally easy, because the one thing with us, they all grow in a multi-purpose compost in a pot. If they don't do that, then obviously they're more specific, and we grow very little of them because as a nurseryman you don't have the time to sort of constantly babysit really hard to grow plants. And so out of the 600 varieties we have, like all of them, like sort of that, what I'd call a roast dinner. They're like, so everyone can attain them and everyone can buy them and know that they'll grow them and be able to sort of maintain their sort of high standards. And the sort of Michelin star is my personal little projects that sort of no one sees. Like they're just like sort of tucked away, and occasionally if I sort of produce some from seed or sort of cut-ins, then we'll release them as a little sort of side batch to sort of customers that we know. And so like we used to do it a lot at shows, so there'd be various customers that obviously are really specialists and they're sort of more towards the Michelin star because they have all the time in the world. And And yeah, so we'd just say that obviously we've got these, do you want some? And yeah, they generally take them straight away.
So I feel like we've barely scratched the surface with the plants in front of you. We've looked at a few. I love that when you gesticulate, you catch your little pom-poms over to your side.
So these ones here. So this is Dianthus pinifolius. So there's a mature plant. It'll have about sort of 20 to 50 flower heads on it, and it looks amazing. So just in the structure on the nursery, so I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, they're sort of deep red. They're tiny little flowers coming in there. But yeah, so but the thing is, it's just the structure of it. It's such tight foliage. The foliage stays really tight. It's a dianthus. It's very easy to grow. It'll self-seed a bit. It's so fine. And
they look like little jewels, actually.
And like sort of for an addition to a container or a rock garden, just gives you a bit of height without sort of all the sort of flagging foliage everywhere, because the foliage is so tight to the ground, and it just fires up sort of 12-inch spikes of red flowers on the
plant.
Yeah, I love that plant, just for sort of a bit of height. And
what's the one dead in front of you with the red flowers?
So that one is there just for colour. So that one is a dwarf delphinium. So that is nudical fox. And so it gets to about sort of a foot to 18 inches, depending on how rich the substrate is. Short-lived. So we've had plants last about 3 years before, but generally we use them as sort of a 2-year plant, but self-seed. So if you have a container or scree bed with gritty soil, then the seed will fall into that grit and germinate the following year. And then obviously you get a nice cluster out of them. And yeah, they're just so showy. They're like, so this one, obviously you can see I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, they're like sort of almost like a bright red / sort of slightly going towards the orange. But yeah, and then there's different forms. We have one that we released this year, which is Delphinium nudical peach. So that's sort of mottled yellow to sort of peach, and yeah, it didn't do it justice. It is really nice. And yeah, that's come from one of these crossed with one of our other delphiniums. And yeah, so they're really showy, really small. Like you want sort of that lush planting in a container, then yeah, they give a lot for their money. So
I lost several hours to your website the other day, just looking through. It should be said that your website is particularly handy for narrowing down, filtering plants by their situation and where you want to grow them, particularly in terms of shade, midday, morning sun, afternoon sun, things like that. And so yeah, I lost several hours, and what I noticed is there were lots of things that you had named. So obviously you're doing a lot of breeding work and a lot of introductions.
Yeah, so we used to be a bit self-absorbed with naming, because we wanted people to obviously on TV to Google or realise it was from us. It'd be Darcy's love or whatever it is. We're trying to sort of go away from that now. So it's sort of friends' names or relatives' names. There's a Delosperma, which is the release this year that we've done, which is Darcy's Smile. But it wasn't named from us because a customer, their granddaughter sadly passed away with cancer. And so he said, can we name a plant? And I was like, like we can do that. What was her favourite colour? He said, oh, she likes sort of the pink and purples. So I was like, oh, okay, this Delosperma will be perfect for her. What's her name? What would you like to call it? And yeah, her name was Darcy. And so obviously we just said, well, we could call it Darcy's Smile. So yeah, it sounds like it's coming from us, but that one was like sort of one of our customers. So yeah, so we're trying to sort of go away from our own sort of names now and trying to be less self-absorbed, and more sort of family names or friends' names or even like customers' names. So sometimes a customer will say like, oh, can you name a plant after me? And yeah, like it's really hard thinking of names of plants. So yeah, so like we're always like sort of keen to get suggestions. Although the Boaty McBoat face like names that some of our friends we don't ask them to name plants.
Now, one of the reasons I was immersed in your website for so long is because I am trying to pick plants for this not overly large trough. But the thing is, it's probably only going to get an hour or two of sun because it's on my quite shady patio. But it was a real delight to see how many of your plants would grow in shade, because maybe I'm the only one, but I always think about rockeries being drenched in sun and exposed and bright, and I'd kind of thought I was going to be incredibly limited, but you have lots of lovely things.
Yeah, the good thing is as well is one person's idea of shade is completely different to mine. So my idea of shade is that it's under a canopy of a tree. It's like really dark and gloomy. There's moss growing over the like sort of the wall that it's like sort of next to, and then you have sort of the dapple shade, which is like obviously generally like sort of towards the edge of the canopy, so it's still getting sun and it's getting sort of good light through there. And then there's the other type of shade. There's obviously 3 types of shade, like sort of it's like different types of snow. And so yeah, there's the one where yours is it just that it's behind the house and like sort of it's fairly shaded.
Just basically north facing, but it does, the sun just about catches it.
But it gets a lot of indirect light, and this is unless you've got a tree canopy over it, you can grow most of the varieties. They're like a sunny position, because all they'll do is flower later. So it will delay the season that they're in. And some you won't get as much flower as you would normally, but generally it doesn't affect it at all. It will just delay the season that it'll actually start flowering in. So if it starts flowering in March, it may start flowering in April, because it's still getting indirect light.
So basically what you're saying is I'm now going to lose about 14 more hours on your website because the spectrum has just widened wildly.
Yeah, so, and the thing as well on the website is that obviously we grow, like each year we change what we grow. One thing we get asked by customers all the time is, why is this? Because they're so used to like sort of crocus and like all the other big ones, and you just see in stock plants, you don't see the out of stock varieties. Whereas for us, we show the whole thing. So when you go in the website, unless you click only the in-stock items, you're spending hours looking through like lists of plants. But like on our website at the moment, I checked like before we came on, so we have 584 varieties and 320 of them are in stock. It's that sort of balance for us, is like we're constantly growing and we're constantly trying to get sort of the varieties in there. And we say that if there's more than 50% available at any one time, that's a good year. But if anyone's listening and they sort of want something specific and obviously it's out of stock, then just email or phone us, because in my brain and in Laura's, my wife's brain that works on nursery as well, is roughly when it's next going to be available. So it may be like sort of September, or it may be next week, or whatever it is. All those ones on the website will be available this year at some point, just at some point.
Well, that might help me with my FLOMO when we come round to it.
One thing I was thinking of, Luke, when we started this, that it's very easy to make rockery look wonderful at this time of the year. Spring and early summer is probably peak flowering rockery time.
Yeah.
And one of the things I was trying to do when I was ordering from you was to order plants that flower later in the year. One that I got from you, I don't know when, I can't tell you when, was a dwarf verbascum, which I thought was really, really charming. It's like a little tiny, I suppose it grows to about maybe 8 inches tall if I'm lucky. I'm exaggerating, I don't know.
Golden wings?
Oh, yes, it could be. And there are quite a number of plants that you actually sell that flower later in the autumn. I seem to remember there was a little white Michaelmas daisy that sort of creeps along the ground and then falls over the edge of a trough. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah, the original one, Scoliopus. I'm probably saying that wrong, but yeah, that it's a creeping Oridron, and I'll take it out with a delphinium at the same time. Yeah, that's really good. Sort of later in the year, there's sort of really the last flowering plant that we do in a year is normally it flowers about sort of second week of October, and that's it used to be Polysina longituba. It's now Lachinella longituba, although I still always called it Polysina because I like the name. And that flowers second week of September normally. So Chelsea this year we should have like sort of amateur clumps available in display. And so it is really nice. It's tight to the ground, forms a nice sort of mat of sort of white and pink striped flowers. Really showy. And that's
Chelsea's going to be a challenge for you probably, because as it is for everybody, because everybody's going to have to put their thinking caps on to do a slightly different display. Either that, or they're going to have to put their forcing caps on, or their whole back caps on.
Yeah. Yeah. So for us, like it's completely out of our season. So sort of more the sort of Scottish nurseries do really well, because obviously it's sort of more sort of woodland and like sort of foliage and that. And so for us, a September Chelsea, I'm going to be super stressed in September. Like it's going to be very interesting. Yeah, I try like sort of. I'd say I'm not a stressful person, but when it comes to Chelsea, no matter whether it's in spring, I'm stressed. But like sort of having it in September, I'm going to be like sort of uber stressed on trying to get something and a display to get together. What we've done was actually shrunk a display, so it's about a third of the size, literally, because obviously like sort of it's something we haven't done for like sort of a very long time, is a show in September. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for us, and
I think it'd be interesting for us all, actually.
Yeah.
The good thing is as well is like September's always like they're long days anyway, so obviously that's a given. They're like 12-hour days, but like it's so hard getting into central London. But like I'm hoping obviously now, like obviously with COVID and stuff like that, it's easier getting into central London, because like sort of trying to commute in there, set up a display, come back, get more plants, go in and like set it up. We're actually I don't know if you ever saw, we used to display in resin troughs, so they look like real stone made out of a resin, and so we've got a new supplier in the UK that's manufacturing for us in the UK, and so we're releasing those at Chelsea. So the good thing is we'll have the Alpine bowls as well, but we'll have those, so at least with the resin troughs we can plant them up on the nursery and carry them in. With the Alpine bowls, you have to go and do it all on site, and like sort of a normal Chelsea, taking like sort of 10 bowls and sort of just hopping backwards and forwards in and out of central London to Cambridgeshire is just, it's so hard work.
I think driving from Cambridgeshire into the Chelsea Flower Show, you must feel as if you've done a day's work.
Yeah, when you started.
Yeah. Brings us quite neatly onto Flomo, really, because if there is a place in the world where, well, apart from East Ruston Old Vicarage, where you come away with like a whole new book of plants for your wish list, it's the Chelsea Flower Show. So Flomo, for anyone who's never listened before, is that kind of FOMO you get about a plant, so something you really want to grow. I obviously have spent all these hours on your website, so there are quite a lot of them. But because I was trying to restrict myself down to shade plants at the time, thinking I had shade, now obviously the list is going to be longer. But there was a wonderful thing that caught my eye called Soldanella montana, which had these masses of little purple bells, little frilled purple bells. And I'd never seen it before. And I just thought it was magical.
Yeah, they're great plants, really sort of early spring flowering. So sort of normally sort of February, March time that they're in flower. That in the sort of European Alps and where they come from, as the snow melts, they'll be sort of popping through sort of in that sort of edge of the woodland. And like, so yeah, they're really, great little plants and perfect for sort of small containers. And yeah, if you've got that sort of shady area, really good in that. So
wow. So Luke, what's your Flomo? Because I think this is something that you've been after for a long time.
Yeah, so Allium chrysanthemum. So like when you Google it, you have to Google it to find it, to actually find out what it is, because it will just show you sort of flavum varieties and Hookerai mulliense and stuff like that. It's a really sort of, it's a pom-pom on a very short stem. It's sort of pastel yellow with a bit of vibrancy, and it's quite a large flower. And so I'll send the link across. The first time I came across it was Harry Jans and his like sort of botanical tours, and it was on a talk that I was at in Germany, and like sort of it came up on the screen, and I was just like straight away I was like, I want that plant. That just looks amazing. And and ever since then, like sort of I've been trying to get it, and I remember I think her name was Jackie Curie maybe, and she holds the national collection of alliums with a landscaping partner. And and like I said to her, like, obviously because she wanted a couple of plants that we had, and I was like, there's this one allium that I want, and she's like, oh yeah, like, so I know the one that you want. And I was like, yeah, if you ever find that, like, just want one seed, like one seed will like sort of do me. I can like sort of do a lot with one seed, as we tell from the cobweb in Wisley. And she said, I think I know someone that has it in their collection in the UK. And I was like, oh my god, like the heavens have opened, and like I'm getting like rays of light on me. And and like that's a flat no. Like there's a lot of no's in horticulture. So yeah, I'm still looking for that one. So whoever that is that holds a collection, if you're watching this, like one seed.
It's not a lot to ask.
Yeah. So anyway, it's like, and to like sort of general public, they may just look at me like, you're just weird. Like, why are you like searching for that one plant for so long? And I think part of it is that I'm like still searching for it. That one's still elusive to me. So
playing hard to get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe like when I'm 65 or something, someone might be give it to me as a retirement present. Maybe I'll keep looking for it.
So, Alan, what's your FLOMO this week?
I've got two, actually, because I thought, well, I'll get one ready. But then, of course, talking with Luke today has been inspirational, I have to say. Thank you very much for your inspirational choices of plants. But Dianthus pinifolius, that is going to be part of my FLOMO. So, Luke, you're going to expect an order within the next few days, I expect. Because I think that is the kind of plant that would look really good in a, shall we say, an informal short grass type planting, not to compete with big grasses. I'm talking about wild grass now, but I mean, on the edges of something. I just think it's a wonderful plant. And the fact that it seeds around a little bit, it helps as well, because it could be one that is a naturalistic looking plant. My other FLOMO is something that was brought home to me talking to a friend called Jo the other day, and she has a salvia, and she was asking me how to propagate it. It is in actual fact called Salvia candelabra, and it's a plant that we had huge stands of. It looks a bit like a sage, on ordinary grey leaf sage on steroids, but it covers itself with these lovely blue flowers in early summer. And it's a terrific looking plant. I love it to bits, but its hardiness is somewhat debatable. And last year, it was this year actually, when we had all those cold wind frosts, it actually killed it in my garden anyway. And so I'm looking out for Salvia candelabra. I've been on the internet and I can't find anybody that's got it in stock. So if anybody's listening and they feel kind, don't forget that we need an allium chrysanthemum for Luke. Yeah. We need a soldanella for Thordis, and I would like Salvia candelabra, please.
FLOMOs all round. Luke, it has been a real treat. It's been a wonderful insight, and it certainly has given us a whole load of FLOMO, so many more things for our wish list. And I know that you're mostly just set dressing with those plants, but it just look like you're in some sort of heavenly alpine meadow. It's wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's the good thing on the nursery. And like, so it's so great talking to you as well. Like, being locked on the nursery, like you hardly get to talk to anyone anymore. Like, you get the odd phone call and they're lovely, but like actually seeing faces and like sort of being like sort of chatting to you is like actually like I was a little bit daunted because I hadn't done any talking for such a long time. But obviously maybe that's why I'm talking so much, because like it's when you get a courier and you've been locked down and you're like telling the courier the life story, they're like, I just want to drop you a parcel. Like, that's what I feel like today. So it's been great talking to you too.
Oh, it's always fun to talk plants. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. Happy gardening.
Happy gardening.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
I was supposed to be on the nursery and I never charged the laptop. So back at home, I quickly locked some plants in the car and then literally just dashed home.
Oh, you're looking very wintry, Mr. Gray.
I'm bloody cold.
I don't know if you could hear it, but the last 5 minutes, Lily has been making a bed very vigorously on the sofa.
When we started, Sally was unpacking some wine bottles, and all I could hear was clink, 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 clink. I thought, God, this is going to sound like an alcoholic place.
But in a minute, she pours all your bottles into the recycling bin, and then we hear how much.
Yeah.